Hi, I'm John and this is Up for Excel. And today I'm going to show you how you can produce a sales forecast like the one we've got on screen in grey using just Excel trend lines and charts. So we'll go through all the various different types of trend lines. I'll go through how you can use the trend lines to form a sales forecast within a spreadsheet, and that could be forecasting anything, and then how to add seasonality to that so you can end up with an actual seasonal sales forecast like I'm showing you. Okay, so a lot to go through as always, so let's get on with it. I've got here some sales data that I've been given, and it's by quarter, by year. So we've got it out to the end of 2019 at the moment, but we want to forecast 2020. So we've got about 12 numbers, which I think is probably about the minimum that you're going to need. You could probably do it with a little bit less perhaps, but this is pretty much the minimum that you're going to need for this kind of technique of forecasting forward. So what I'm instantly going to do, just using shortcut keys here to Control Shift and the arrow keys to highlight that data. I'm going to at the moment exclude anything we haven't got sales data for and push Alt F1 to get a very quick chart up on the screen. So I'll just move that up there and expand it a bit. So this is a visual representation of our chart data. And the main thing that I want to do here is add a trend line on this so we can see what things are going. So by right clicking on the actual series, you'll see we get add trend line. Now you can also add it by clicking on the plus button here and you'll see trend line there, or add chart element and you've got trend lines here. So what we're going to do is going to try and find one that best sort of describes our sales data. So here's a linear one, and you could argue that perhaps that's okay. I don't know. But one of the ways of checking that is that we're going to actually now forecast on this trend line. When you click on the trend line, you'll see over on the right hand side you've got various options here. The different types of trend line, and here you can see you've got a forecast box. So what we're going to do is forecast forward 4 periods, because that will give us the whole of the next year. As soon as I hit enter on the keyboard there, our chart expands to now include this trend going out. But what I want to quickly do is maybe just click on some different trend lines to see what kind of values that we're going to get. So that is an exponential, that's a linear, logarithmic, polynomial, and you can see straight away there's various options with polynomial, but polynomial, that is curving around, and you know, a third order polynomial would clearly be quite an ambitious looking forecast, to say the least. And I think they're only going to get more ambitious. Whereas a second order one is portraying that our sales have basically peaked and are going to go back down. So I don't like to look at that either. So polynomial, I say we can rule out. Linear is looking all right. Exponential, I think we're unlikely to get exponential growth in our sales anyway, so I wouldn't want to be using that. So logarithmic at the moment is looking pretty good. Power is also looking good. Let's just compare that to logarithmic. Yeah, I'd say power is probably slightly flatter, looks probably slightly better. And then moving average, which you can't use to forecast forward, but what you can do is you can use to get an underlying trend. So if you've got a seasonal pattern, for example, moving average will let you wipe out that seasonal pattern. So by picking a 4-period moving average, what we're doing is taking the average of the previous 4 quarters and plotting that. So that's going to give us a much smoother line. But again, we can't use it to forecast forward. but it is another type of trend line that you might want to consider adding to your graph to get like a, if you like, a sort of underlying performance line on there. Okay, so I'm going to use a power line to forecast forward. Now, I might just want to check it by going perhaps to something like 12 periods forward and saying, does it still look remotely sensible? 12 being 3 years forward. I compare that to logarithmic. There's very little in it, to be honest. We've eyeballed these trend lines, but I'm now going to display something called the R-squared value. Now I'm going to move that up to the top, and I'm going to make it, much larger. Now this, if you like, is a measure of how well the trend line fits the existing data. So we want the biggest number we can get. And I don't get too hung up on the absolute number here for the purposes of forecasting, because we know we've got seasonality going on here, so we're never going to get anything perfect. So we'll just go back to the types of trend line by clicking on the trend line and just double check. So a linear, that goes down to 0.25 or 0.26, exponential 0.27, logarithmic 33, 28, 37, right, and there is no. So actually just eyeballing it and statistically looking at it has given us the exact same result. Power definitely appears to fit the data best and gives us the most sensible forecast. We're definitely going to use power. How do we then turn that into a set of numbers for a sales forecast? Well, we're going to do that in 2 steps. Firstly, we're going to generate the absolute numbers that go with that line, and then we're going to apply the seasonality to that line. So all that work's actually going to be done on the Excel spreadsheet, but in order to do that we need to know the form of that line, and to do that we simply tick this box that says display equation on chart. Now this equation, I'm just going to again expand this box, because what we need to do is not only do we need to make the equation larger because we want to see the numbers, but we also need to increase the number of decimal places on it. So we select on the box with the equation in it, we go to here and we can format the number. So what we want to do is on the number, and we want to crank the decimal places up to some kind of ridiculous value. So let's try 10. Yeah, I think we can probably go more than that. Let's try 15. Right, we're getting a lot of zeros at the end now, so we really don't need to go any further than that, I wouldn't have thought. And that's going to be our equation. Right. And we're effectively going to use this equation in Excel. So I copy and paste it from here. So I'm just using Control-C there. And I'm going to just put it down here for the moment as the equation there. And then I'm going to move that chart slightly out of the way because we don't really need that right now. So I'm going to have to introduce a new column here, which I'm going to call the forecast. Fairly straightforward. And I actually need as well an index, which you'll see at the moment, because in this equation, the letter X that you can see just here, if I highlight it, that is not a multiplication, that is a letter X, and it refers to the position on the X-axis. So we need to create that a position number. So this index column is just going to literally be 1, and then it's just going to increment by 1 all the way through. I'll just drag that down so that we cover it all. I'll center that. Okay. So our forecast, we're now going to use part of this equation, and this will be our X value. So to make this easier, I'm going to effectively put this equation into several different columns. So you can see we have our multiple and our power. Okay? And our multiple is this value here, which we can take to there. We don't need all those zeros on it. And we'll put that as our multiple. Our power is the next value, which is that one. And we'll put that there. So our equation in the formula box now, in the forecast box, sorry, is going to equal our multiple times by our index. So that is our 735865 times our x to the power of, which is this symbol there, and our power number. Okay, and I'm just going to give this forecast column the same formatting as my sales column for now. Right, now if we can just copy these all the way down like that for now, and I can copy that all the way down, and we now get a forecast for column. And we're not actually interested in the forecast back here really, but what I'm now going to do is add that onto the chart to make sure that we've got the right number. So I'm going to select some more data. I'm going to add this series, which is going to be the forecast series, and I'm going to put it on like that and OK it. Okay, and you can see that that is perfectly matching the trend line, so we've definitely got the equation correct. Now we need to apply some seasonality to this, because we can't legitimately put that forward as a sensible forecast, because we know that looking at the shape of the years, you know, Q4, for example, appears to be a particularly high sales month, and it would be daft to put some kind of even spread across the year forward as a sensible forecast. So we'll add seasonality. And there's numerous kind of ways of doing this, but one thing I could do is I'm going to add a calc column. I'll call it calc 1, because we might need more than one of them, where I'm going to divide the forecast by the sales. I'll give us some kind of ratio of how accurate the forecast was to the sales. Right? And I'm also going to rename this as forecast 1. I'm going to insert a column and call that forecast, because actually I'm not going to call it forecast 1, I'm going to call it forecast calc. And we'll just wrap that text there. Right, so we have this ratio going on here. Now for the bottom 4 periods, I suggest that we take the average Q1 ratio and then multiply that by the forecast to give us a seasonally adjusted number. So the reason this is going to work, or will give us some kind of idea, is that what we're saying is that our trend line gives us an inaccuracy in Q1, for example. So in that case, it's slightly over-exaggerated Q1. Here, it's slightly over-exaggerated Q1, and same here. So we know that chances are that this bar here for Q1 is over-exaggerated, so we want to lower it. And we want to lower it by the average of the error in the previous 3 quarter ones. So I'm just going to take an average. And I could do this manually by holding down Control, and picking all the Q1 numbers, which are those, and hit enter, and that will give us our average. An alternative way of doing this is to use the averageif formula. So we'll do averageif. Now, we need to pick our range that we're checking our criteria against, which is the quarter. So we want to average a particular quarter, and we'll fix that range by pushing F4. We'll then pick the quarter that we want to look for, which in this case is 2. But we won't fix that because when we copy and paste this formula down, we want it to pick up the very next one. And then where do we want it to look for the average, or average which numbers? It's these set here. So again, highlight that and fix them with F4. And there we go. Now that should give us the exact same result if we copy and paste that formula back on there. And yes, it does. So that proves that it's working. Right, so we now have our forecasted ratios. And just to show that they're forecast, I'm going to put them in blue for now. Just a different colour so we can tell that's a different formula to that. Right, so now in theory, because we divided the forecast, we divided the forecast by the sales, we need to divide the forecast by that calculation in order to get the sales. And I put that in the wrong place, haven't I? Right, so that divided by that. Now, we know, just to check, I need to just put this, get that. We know that Q1, because when we eyeball it, we can see Q1 always came out slightly lower. We know we've got our formula the right way around anyway, because we're coming out with a slightly lower number. So I can drag that one down there. And then I now want to add that as a plot on the chart. So we'll go back to the chart and see how it looks. Design, select some more data. We're going to now add a series. We'll call it forecast. And we're going to go all the way down there. Right. Okay. And while we're at it, we're going to, I'm going to change this axis label to include the new quarters on the bottom as well. Okay. So I've now put them back on the chart. But the key, and you can see that we now have some seasonality. So we have a high Q4, a relatively high Q3, slight dip from 1 to 2. And to be honest, that dip from 1 to 2, it only happens in 2019, and it happened quite dramatically. So you can see that we're now hedging our bets really, because this is just the average profile, if you like, from the previous 3 years, and because 2019 was such an outlier, it's distorted it slightly, so we've ended up with very similar values there. But I think that looks all right. We need to probably now just remove that, I would say. So I just highlighted that entire series and put it on, because that was just checking the trend line. You can see this trend line is no longer required either, except that it can be, if we want to produce, it can sometimes be worth just leaving it on there and extrapolating it further forward again. So I'm just having a quick look. So we'll go forward 8 periods now. And we could do this exact same calculation going forward. So for example, if I wanted to do another year, so I go 24, all these formulas are set up to pick this up. I should be able to just go and do this like that. And this forecast calc. And the reason that's coming out 0, of course, is because I've hidden these numbers here. So I just need to drag those down as well. There. And that's given us yet some more numbers. And if I go to the the design of the chart and select the data again. I actually now could probably do something a bit more sensible and do something like that. Oh no, maybe highlight that. There we go. I would still say, personally, we'll take off that trend line now. And that's a reasonable forecast that you've got there for sales. And if you want to tart up that chart a bit and get it looking, you can get it looking something like this, which is the one I prepared earlier. I go through all this sort of techniques on a previous video of mine, which is 7 tips for improving the appearance of charts, and that incorporates probably about 4 or 5 of those tips to make it look like that. And there you go, a decent sales forecast. In the next video, I'm going to be showing you how to use and create dual access charts. So make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell icon, and that way you'll get to hear when that video comes out if it's not out already.